Margaret Greene had always been the kind of woman who lived with energy in her step. At 68, she could still recall the days when she would walk 3 miles every morning through the neighborhood park, greeting every familiar face along the way. Those walks had been her therapy, her meditation, and her social hour all rolled into one. But after a mild knee injury last winter, the routine she'd treasured for decades began to fade. What started as just taking it easy for a few weeks slowly turned into months of less movement, and before she knew it, her once confident stride was replaced by hesitant shuffles from one room to another. Her son, Daniel, had noticed the change when he visited one weekend. He'd been away for work and hadn't seen her in over 2 months. "Mom," he said gently while helping her carry groceries from the car, "you're moving slower than usual." Margaret forced a smile. "I'm just being careful with my knee. Doctors said no need to push it." Daniel nodded but could see the truth behind her eyes. Caution had slowly slipped into inactivity. That evening, while they sat at the kitchen table sipping tea, Daniel shared a story about one of his friend's parents. "They're around your age," he began, "and they went through something similar. But instead of just walking less and less, they started doing different types of movement and small daily habits that kept them strong without putting too much strain on their legs." Margaret listened with curiosity. "Like what?" she asked. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Well, 5 main things, actually. And before you roll your eyes, I think they might work for you too. You're not someone who's ready to slow down completely. You just need a different approach." The next day, Daniel stayed over to help her ease into the new plan. The first thing he suggested wasn't about exercise at all, it was about stretching. They began with gentle morning stretches in the living room, sunlight pouring in through the lace curtains. Margaret was surprised by how good it felt to move her body without the pressure of covering a long distance. They did slow neck rolls, shoulder shrugs, side bends, and seated hamstring stretches. "This keeps your muscles and joints from stiffening up," Daniel explained. "Even if you're walking less, you can still keep your range of motion." At first, Margaret giggled at how awkward some of the movements felt, but after a week she noticed her body feeling looser and her posture improving. The second change Daniel introduced was something Margaret hadn't done since her working years: light strength training. No big gym equipment, no heavy weights, just small resistance bands and 2-pound dumbbells that fit easily in her hands. "You lose muscle faster as you age if you're not working it," Daniel said, demonstrating a few moves. They did simple bicep curls, chair squats, and standing side leg raises for balance. At first, Margaret doubted her ability to keep up, but Daniel reminded her that strength wasn't just for lifting things. It was for being able to get up from a chair easily, carry her own groceries, and maintain independence. By the 3rd week, she could feel herself getting stronger. The third habit Daniel encouraged was balance exercises. "Falls are one of the biggest risks for people over 60, he explained. They started practicing standing on one leg while holding the kitchen counter, then slowly letting go for a few seconds. They tried heel-to-toe walking across the living room, which made Margaret laugh every time she wobbled. Daniel reassured her that even small improvements in balance could make a big difference in daily life. The fourth change had nothing to do with movement but everything to do with vitality, staying socially active. Daniel noticed that since walking less, Margaret had been spending more time alone at home. "You used to see people in the park every morning," he reminded her. "That was your social battery charger." They started scheduling weekly coffee dates with her friend Linda, phone calls with her sister, and even a monthly community center book club. The more Margaret reconnected with others, the more energy she seemed to have for everything else. The fifth and final thing Daniel suggested was short bursts of activity throughout the day instead of one long workout. "You don't have to walk 3 miles at once," he told her. "Just add little moments of movement into your day." Margaret started pacing around the kitchen while waiting for water to boil, doing a few seated marches during TV commercials, and even tidying up the living room in short, brisk bursts. Over the next few months, these 5 changes transformed Margaret's daily life. She didn't return to the exact same long walk she once had, but she didn't feel like she'd lost her health either. Instead, she gained a new kind of confidence, one that came from knowing she could adapt. By summer, she invited Daniel back to join her for a morning in the park. They didn't walk far, but they enjoyed the warm air, the sound of birds, and the familiar sight of neighbors waving hello. Margaret realized that her life wasn't about doing things exactly as before. It was about finding ways to keep moving, connecting, and thriving, no matter her age. One evening, as she sat in her living room watching the sunset through the window, Margaret thought about how easy it would have been to give in to slowing down completely. But with a little guidance, she'd learned that walking less didn't mean living less. It just meant finding new ways to keep her body and spirit strong. And she knew, deep down, that as long as she kept making those small, consistent choices, she'd be ready to greet each day with energy, grace, and gratitude.